Well, hey there, and welcome to another lecture, another brief lecture in the FDA regulations class at the UAMS FAW Bozeman College of Public Health. My name is Mitch. I'm the instructor in this class, as you know, and today we're going to cover regulation of dietary supplements. So you may be wondering why sometimes I cover certain topics with these little lectures. Sometimes I give you links to other classes. Well, or other sources. Well, that's because with an online class, we have a lot of flexibility for that. And I like to send you to expert sources or primary sources whenever possible. But there are some topics that I like to cover myself because I have expertise in those areas. So the history of the FDA, I know a lot about biomarkers, and I know quite a bit about regulation of dietary supplements and that sort of thing. So I have expertise in these areas, so I like to take these lectures myself. And so let's get into it, all right? So first, a little bit about the history of legislation and regulation of dietary supplements. So prior to 1994, dietary supplements were basically regulated as foods. So this really required demonstration that ingredients were GRAS, or generally recognized as safe, or that they were allowed under some provision for food additives regulation, okay? In 1994, Congress passed the DSHEA Act, or Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. And that was really championed by Orrin Hatch and Tom Harkin, who are shown here in these photos. And what it did was it adopted a legal definition of dietary supplement, and it defined some rules for regulation. Now, the 25th anniversary of the DSHEA passed us just recently, just back in 2019. There were some really hotly anticipated changes to the DSHEA at that time. A lot of excitement or interest over what was going to happen because 25th anniversary, perfect time to revisit it. And there were a lot of expectations about forthcoming changes and that sort of thing. And then COVID happened, and along with many other things, it kind of got put on the back of the legislative burner. So we'll see. Maybe as things die down a little bit with COVID over the next year or so, maybe we'll see some return of interest in this area. Okay, so what is the definition then of a dietary supplement? Well, a supplement has to meet criteria in 4 major categories. Okay, so first, the ingredients category. A supplement must contain one of the following ingredients: a vitamin, mineral, herb, or other botanical, some kind of plant component, or another ingredient intended to support or supplement normal dietary intake. So for example, you may feel that you don't get enough protein in your diet, so you take an amino acid capsule or a protein powder or something like that. Or it can be a concentrate, metabolite, extract, or some combination of the above. So it could be, for example, a concentrate of vitamins. It can be an extract of an herb. Those things would qualify as dietary supplements. It's important to note here that synthetic versions of extracted chemicals do not count. So yes, you may be able to extract aspirin from the bark of the cinchona tree, but aspirin is man-made today. It is not a dietary supplement because it is synthesized, it is synthetic. Next, you have the formulation category. So a supplement must be formulated or intended for ingestion. It has to be taken through the mouth and absorbed through your GI tract. So a supplement can be in a capsule, maybe a tablet, a chewable, sometimes a bar, or whatever. As long as it goes into your mouth, it gets absorbed from the GI tract. That means nasal sprays, cosmetics, lotions, even if they contain vitamin A, vitamin E, whatever, they cannot be considered supplements by definition. This also requires careful marketing, okay? So advertising a protein shake, for example, as a post-workout snack can make it a food automatically in the eyes of the FDA, and it will become subject to food regulations. So you have to be careful. Third category, intended use. So a supplement must be intended as a supplement, right? This seems super obvious, but again, a couple of important implications. It must be labeled as a supplement, right? It has to say somewhere on the bottle, dietary supplement, herbal supplement, something like that. It must not be labeled like a drug. You can't say that this is meant to treat, cure, mitigate, or prevent any disease. And we're going to come back to this once or twice in this talk, okay? So it's an important concept. Finally, there's this category of relationship to drugs. So interestingly, a supplement can include a drug, but the drug has to have been marketed or sold as a supplement before it became a drug. So I have a couple examples here. A real simple one, N-acetyl-L-cysteine, or NAC. This is acetylated cysteine. Cysteine is just an amino acid. This exists at least a bit in your body already. You can get it through your diet, and so it's kind of basically considered a supplement, or a dietary component at least. But it's also a drug. So if you've ever had a bad flu or bad lung congestion, the clinician may have given you a mask or some kind of vapor to breathe from a sort of a moist vapor. Well, that was probably NAC because it binds to sulfhydryl groups. It can kind of break up disulfide bonds and relieve congestion in that way. It's also the standard of care treatment for acetaminophen overdose because it's a precursor for resynthesis of glutathione, which is important to detoxify the reactive metabolite of acetaminophen. Now, a more complex example, more complicated situation would be cannabidiol, or CBD. Real popular right now. You see it all over the stores. You even see some places advertising, hey, our pharmacy sells CBD oil. Well, the Farm Bill under the Trump administration, so it was passed pretty recently, basically said that, okay, hemp extracts, so hemp is the low THC content version of marijuana that CBD is extracted from. Hemp extracts and CBD oils, those things can be marketed as supplements, according to the Farm Bill. But CBD also basically was approved as a drug around the same time for treatment of certain rare forms of epilepsy. And so it's a drug and it's a supplement, and this all kind of happened at about the same time from the perspective of the FDA at least. And so the FDA could step in and say, no, this is a drug. You can't sell this as a supplement. But they haven't done that yet, which is a little bit of a surprise to many of us. We'll see. It's an area to keep an eye on. Now, okay, so that's the definition of a supplement. But the big thing you always hear people talk about when they talk about supplements is they'll often say, supplements aren't regulated by the FDA. That's actually wrong. But what they mean is, I think what they're really referring to when they say that is the issue of safety. Now, the regulation of safety of supplements, it is FDA regulated. It's just done in a very different way from drugs and foods and medical devices. Regulation is centered on this concept of adulteration. Now, adulteration can be straightforward. It can be exactly what it sounds like, just the presence of an unadvertised ingredient in the supplement. Or it can be complex, so it could be, really the FDA says the presence of any chemical that can cause harm, even when it's an advertised ingredient, so even when it's supposed to be there. And the way that I sort of rationalize this in my head is that the idea of a supplement is that you're supplementing something you already get in the diet. Well, if you're already getting in the diet and you're not getting sick from it, it must be safe. So there's this sort of expectation of safety. And if it proves to not be safe in your product, well, okay, we say it's adulterated. It must not really be quite the same thing you're getting in your diet, right? Now, demonstration of safety is similar to the GRAS status process, generally recognized as safe process, and that the manufacturer should document safety. They should have documentation of safety on hand, and they should do that before the product is developed or marketed. There's one big difference, though, with the typical GRAS process, and that is the FDA requires that a supplement does not present a significant or unreasonable risk of illness or injury, whereas for GRAS, that status is based on reasonable certainty that the substance is not harmful. And that distinction is very important because the word certainty clearly implies presence of substantive evidence of safety. While that language for dietary supplements doesn't really. I mean, it shouldn't cause harm, but you don't have to be certain that it doesn't before you put it on the market, essentially. Nevertheless, it's the smart thing to do for a manufacturer to try to establish safety in some form, especially if they, in the event of a lawsuit or of an FDA challenge. And so most companies will collect evidence of safety either to support GRAS status or to demonstrate some basic level of safety when there isn't sufficient evidence for GRAS status. And if a supplement is found to cause harm, then the FDA can declare that it is adulterated and take regulatory action after the fact. But it has to support that claim somehow. In other words, the burden of proof is on the FDA. It's a post-marketing regulation, and the burden of proof is on the FDA. So really what it boils down to is this. Supplements are regulated by the FDA, but when it comes to safety, that regulation occurs post-marketing. There's pre-marketing regulation with labeling, but in terms of safety, the regulation is post-marketing. They don't have to be proven safe before sales, though it's advisable, but they can be proven unsafe after the fact, and the FDA has to do that. Okay, so how's post-marketing surveillance done? Well, kind of similar to other drugs. This is one way anyway. The Dietary Supplement and Non-Prescription Drug Consumer Protection Act of 2006 requires manufacturers and distributors to file adverse event reports within 15 days of becoming aware of them. Okay. Other routes of post-marketing surveillance would be consumer activism, so consumers can voice concerns publicly, file lawsuits, that sort of thing. And clinicians can publish case reports, letters to the editor expressing concern, that kind of thing. It's not necessarily all there is to this. The FDA has the NCTR. They can investigate toxicity after the fact, after marketing, or they might contract with an expert in dietary supplement safety who can do some experiments after the fact. But again, it's all post-marketing. A few other things I want to cover. You have this category, this concept of new dietary ingredients, or NDIs. Sounds kind of familiar, right? Well, an NDI is any ingredient included in a supplement that was not included in a supplement prior to passage of the DSHEA in '94. Then it's considered an NDI. Manufacturers are responsible for ensuring there's reasonable evidence of safety for NDIs, and they have to notify the FDA that they plan to market a product with an NDI at least 75 days before they introduce it to the market. And any supplement that contains a harmful NDI can be labeled adulterated by the FDA and subject to regulatory enforcement. Another thing to mention is manufacturers are required to register their manufacturing facilities with the FDA, and those facilities have to follow current good manufacturing practices, CGMP, MP. All stages of production, manufacturing, packaging, labeling, have to be monitored and evaluated on a regular basis under these rules to ensure quality control. One kind of interesting note, since the issue of expiration dates came up in a discussion recently, is that expiration dating on labels for supplements is unique because it's not technically required. Now, many stores that sell supplements, like VitaShop and GNC, will require expiration dates or some other indication of shelf life on products that they sell. But the manufacturers have no legal obligation to provide evidence that those dates are meaningful. So expiration dates may not mean very much on supplements. There are good reasons for that, arguably at least. Sometimes it's hard to measure degradation of these products that are commonly sold as supplements, like a complex botanical extract. How do you determine the stability of that? Unless you have one specific active ingredient you can point to, then maybe you run the risk of being labeled a drug. So expiration dates are interesting with supplements. Might not be meaningful all the time. Now, another thing we got to talk about, and this part's really important, is supplement labeling, okay? The FDA requires supplement labels to contain at least 5 things. A statement of identity, so this means it basically has to say this is a supplement. It has to say dietary supplement, herbal supplement, something like that on the label. It has to have contact information for the manufacturer, so name and location of the manufacturer, packer, distributor, somebody you can get in touch with if there's an issue. And there has to be an ingredients list, nutrition information, and an accurate statement of ingredient quantities. So you can't just list the ingredients, you have to say how much is in there. Now those three things with the asterisks are now usually included on a supplement facts label. So after the DSHEA, there was some controversy about how should these things be presented on a label, these three things. And the compromise that was arrived at, I think in the early to mid, maybe late 2000s, somewhere in the 2000s, was this idea of a supplement facts label. It looks a lot like a nutrition facts label on food products, but it has to contain those three items, okay? So here's an example. This would be for like fish oil capsules. Okay, ingredients, it contains cod liver oil and some other stuff in the capsule. There's a statement of quantity of the main components. So you have vitamins expressed as international units. You have the amount of omega-3 fatty acids expressed in grams. And it has that nutrition information. In this case, it's you got a bunch of fatty acids, right? It's going to have some fat content and some calories. So you've got to put that on your label. And then here are some additional things that are important to know, additional claims that are allowed on the label. So you have structure function claims. And this is where you can describe the nutrient or ingredient in the product intended to affect a structure or function of a human. You can describe a well-established mechanism by which the ingredient has that effect. And then you can make a claim of broad general well-being claim that comes as a result of the effect of that ingredient through that mechanism. Okay? So you can't say this cures cancer, but you can say, this improves mood because people who are healthier are in a better mood, that kind of thing. It's very important to distinguish this from disease claims, which are prohibited. Again, you cannot say your product treats, cures, mitigates, or prevents any disease. That's a disease claim. It's not allowed. Now, there's a little bit of a gray area here where you can have health claims, okay? And these health claims walk this fine line between those allowed structure function claims and the prohibited disease claims. So one example might be omega-3 fatty acids are good for heart function, and there's a link between them and reduced risk of heart disease. You're not claiming that your specific product prevents heart disease. You're just pointing out some facts. These connections exist. Omega-3 fatty acids and heart function, or omega-3 fatty acids and risk of heart disease. You have to submit those to the FDA, generally speaking, before you can market your product with those claims. And the claims have to have a very strong basis in evidence, usually in the form of a consensus statement, okay, an expert consensus. Now, some claims are more generally acceptable, and the FDA publishes a list of qualified health claims on their website at this link. You can go there, you can just Google FDA qualified health claims. They're careful to say these are not pre-qualified health claims that are just blanket allowed on any product, right? But generally speaking, they are allowed, and they publish these in the form of letters. So you can go to this link, click on the link for letters, and you can look through those. Another category of allowed claims are nutrient claims. I don't find these very interesting, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but just know these are things like it's some percentage of recommended daily allowance of this. If you take our product, you get that percentage of the recommended daily allowance. Or this product is high in omega-3 fatty acids. Just general nutrient claims like that. Now, an interesting little nuance here is that there's the existence of this sort of what I would refer to as gray literature. So historically, books, brochures, pamphlets, whatever, published by manufacturers of a supplement were considered part of the product labeling and subject to regulation. So if a supplement company makes omega-3 fatty acids and they hire an author to write a book about the great benefits of omega-3 fatty acids, and then the manufacturer themselves published that book, that was considered part of the product labeling and could result in regulatory actions. Now, supplement companies are basically exempt from that, and these this gray literature is categorized as third-party literature. So now a supplement company could go out and publish a book by some paid hack, a quack with an MD or a PhD, for example, in which the author makes all kinds of great claims about the supplements that they sell. And as long as you're not prominently featuring your specific product on the cover of the book, and you're not selling your supplement and the book on the same shelf right next to each other, that's fine. You can get away with it. So maybe not such a great thing. Okay, now that's the labeling. What about advertising? Well, these days ads are also considered separate from the labels, and they're now regulated primarily by the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC. So labeling is regulated by the FDA, generally speaking. Advertising regulated by the FTC, generally speaking. There's a little bit of gray there because, for example, there are some other government entities or powers, authorities, that are able to pursue enforcement, like a state judge or an attorney general in some cases. But generally speaking, this is how it works. Labeling, FDA, advertising, FTC. Now, another thing I want to mention, this is going beyond FDA regulations. Some people might argue FDA regulations are a little bit weak, and we need to strengthen DSHEA, or we need some other mechanism. Well, another mechanism does exist. You have third-party regulation of supplement companies. Basically, this is when companies voluntarily submit to regulation by a trade association. A couple examples would be the UNPA, United Natural Products Alliance, and the NPA, Natural Products Association. There's a few others out there as well. And they provide kind of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours situation, right? Where they will provide legislative advocacy for the supplement industry in general. Like, hey, Congress, let's not change DSHEA too much. Let's keep it the way it is. We like these flexible regulations, that kind of thing. They can also provide consultation, legal services in some cases, and other aid to supplement manufacturers. And they do this, though, in exchange for, obviously, payment, membership dues, but also maintenance of certain minimum standards for quality and safety. So you have to prove that you are not selling an adulterated product, that kind of thing. They may require you to submit your products for analysis by the NSF, not the National Science Foundation, but a company called NSF that will search for adulterants like pesticides and so on. They may have requirements like that. And they can issue orders to basically tell their member companies, okay, you have to stop selling this product because either we or the FDA or another party has determined that that product is unsafe, okay? So that's another aspect of regulation that's not often talked about. It's not mentioned in your book, but it's very can be very important. Again, though, this is voluntary. Not all supplement manufacturers participate in these programs. Okay, so that pretty much sums up what you need to know about supplements. Anything you see here in red, these concepts, I want you to know for the exam. Those are critical concepts for the exam and for your potentially future career, okay? So things you see in red. And if the red is a high up header, then know the stuff beneath that header, okay? All right, so that is it. Yeah, thanks.